Now let's see what are the post-mortem changes in meat. Post-mortem changes are basically the changes that take place in animals once it is slaughtered. So it's basically after slaughtering changes that occur in the meat muscles. Normally, there's a term called rigor mortis, which happens after the slaughter of animal, and this means basically the stiffening of muscles, stiffening of the animal muscles. There is also another change called as the lactic acid formation that lowers the pH of meat after slaughtering. So this is another significant change that takes place during post-mortem changes. Another phenomena that can be observed in post-mortem changes is actually the swelling of muscles. So there are more fluid that gets into the muscles, and these muscles become hard. So this is the traditional change that normally takes place in muscle of the meat. As we know that once we slaughter the animal, we cut the circulatory passages for the animal, so that would mean that the circulation has been stopped. So there's no oxygen getting into the muscles. But the enzymes that are present in meat, they keep on working. They do not stop their functions immediately. So the oxidation process starts taking place, especially for the glycogen that is present in muscles. So this glycogen is converted into lactic acid. This lactic acid makes the meat a little more acidic, and it changes the pH of the meat. And this amount of glycogen that is stored in animal would actually decide how much lactic acid is being produced in an animal. As we discussed that the glycogen is a storage carbohydrate that is present in most of the animals and humans as well. It is only used when we don't have food or when there's a fasting situation. So this glycogen basically is a reserved carbohydrate that gives you energy, and it is stored in the liver. But when we slaughter an animal that doesn't have a higher glycogen level in them, so that glycogen would not be converted into lactic acid, so there would be different changes in the meat muscle. For example, it becomes gummy and sticky. So this is a quality of meat that is not desirable. So as is normally advised that we should feed the animal very well, and we should give the water and feed before slaughtering of animals so that their glycogen reserves are not exhausted. So that would increase the quality of meat. So because we would have more glycogen reserve, they would be converted into lactic acid, and that would be bringing in the desirable changes as well. Another change that takes place in the post-mortal changes of animals is the stiff muscles. They start becoming soft after certain times. Initially they are stiff, but then gradually it becomes soft. So this softening of these tissues or the muscles, basically, it is also termed as aging of meat as well. So, and that aging is basically controlled. We would want to have particular conditions maintained to store meat in a sense that it brings out the desirable changes. It brings on the tenderness in the meat. So that tenderness basically is dependent upon the holding time and holding conditions as well. So that's why this understanding these post-mortem changes that takes place in the muscles after slaughtering is important, because we can control the quality of meat by controlling these conditions. On the other hand, on the contrary, if we don't have desirable conditions for the storage, then there are a lot of undesirable things that would happen. For example, the putrefactive bacteria that would start growing on the meat, and meat would spoil very quickly. So if we talk about what kind of control conditions we normally try to maintain for proper aging of meat, we would try to have a temperature of 34 to 36 degree Fahrenheit under which the meat must be stored. The carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere is also very important to maintain the quality of meat. and we would have 70% humidity around the surrounding environment of meat. So these are basically favorable conditions that increase the desirable changes in meat. So once we have it, the meat can be stored for 3 to 6 weeks, and after this aging process, the meat is generally ready for sale. This aging process is also called as ripening of meat as well. So you would probably not normally observe this in our country, that we do this ripening or aging process of meat, but this is a general practice for all the industrial meats world over. So this is basically the method in which these meat muscles are stored in a way that they produce good quality meat at the end. So this was all about the post-mortem changes in meat and their effect on the quality of meat.